How do I get a hot bod? Oh God. How do you get a big butt? So the first thing is that you need to eat enough food so that when you are growing your butt, aka your glutes, you have enough fuel to actually build muscle in your butt. So if you're a female and you're looking to grow your butt or get a big butt or grow your glutes, you have to make sure that you're eating enough food in general. This is an issue that a lot of females fall into, and I did it myself, is that we tend to want to just restrict. We feel like we need to be eating the smallest amount. And if your main goal is to get a big butt and build, glutes, you have to eat enough food to support that muscle growth in general. The second thing would be just making sure that you are doing exercises that are going to stimulate muscle growth in your glutes, right? So you're doing different types of exercises that you are able to recover from as well. That's another thing, kind of going off a tangent here. But recovery is super important. If you're not recovering from whatever you're doing, you're not going to be building enough muscle. And then especially with like training your glutes, if you're going into the gym and you're doing glute exercises like every single day, stop. You need to, your muscle tissues need to come back to baseline before you can actually grow more muscle tissue. And what I mean by that is there's something called the stimulus to fatigue ratio. So when you're in the gym and you're working out and you're stimulating your muscles, that is the stimulus part of it. The fatigue part of it is that if you don't allow yourself to come back to baseline, if you don't allow your muscles to repair and come back to baseline, you won't be able to actually grow new muscle tissue. So once you break your muscle tissue down, right, you need to give it time to actually rebuild and repair before you go and try to break it down again. If you break that muscle tissue down and it's still repairing, and then you go try to stimulate it again and break it down again, then it's not gonna, you're just basically doing work and not getting any reward out of it. So recovery is huge with that. And then kind of going back to the exercises, with the glutes specifically, making sure that you're incorporating movements that are going to stimulate your glutes. So thinking about also, this is getting a little bit more technical, but thinking about training your muscle in different positions. So we have like lengthening positions and shortened positions. So if we're thinking about the glutes, when you're doing different exercises, what are those movements that are hardest in the lengthened position, which is going to be the stretch part of it. So thinking of Romanian deadlifts, where you're bending over and you're getting a stretch in that glute, and that's where it's hardest, right? Where you feel that stretch. That's gonna be a lengthened exercise, versus a shortened exercise is gonna be something where it's hardest in the shortened position or in the most contracted position. And that's going to be with, barbell glute bridges or hip thrusts. That's in the shortened position, or 45-degree hyperextension. That's your glute in the shortened position. So you want to make sure you have a range of exercises where you're training in different positions and kind of going between those. Because if you're only doing, glute bridges, you're going to miss out on that lengthened position, right? If you're only doing RDLs, you're going to miss out on the shortened position. So that's a little bit technical, but just making sure that you're picking exercises that are, smart is going to be one thing. And then also picking exercises that, work well with you. Because that's another thing. Like if you're doing a movement that you're not really benefiting from, or something that either you don't enjoy or you don't feel good doing, or you're not confident in, then that's going to kind of hinder things as well, because you won't get as much out of it. So that just comes back to kind of picking exercises that work for your personal biomechanics, and also just, obviously you need to try different things out, but choosing exercises that work for you is going to be important. And then also thinking about, specifically with glute training, there's a difference between actually stimulating muscle growth and getting, what we want out of that, versus feeling something happening. So there's a difference between tension and sensation. So when we're building muscle, right, we know that tension in the muscle is most important. Like mechanical tension is what drives muscle growth. And sometimes we can confuse that with stimulation. And what I mean that is specifically with glute exercises, there's a lot of glute exercises with like bands that people feel a lot of sensation when they're using the bands, but that sensation might not actually translate into having enough tension within the muscle to stimulate growth. So there's a fine line between not a fine line actually. There's a little bit of a confusing line between figuring out what exercises are actually going to stimulate muscle growth versus which ones are more so sensation. So with all that being said, super, super complex, but just make sure that you're focusing on, movements that work for your biomechanics and that you're actually kind of educating yourself on like, all right, is this actually a good movement, or is this something that I'm just doing because I saw it on Instagram or I heard about it somewhere else? So in terms of glute exercises, my favorites would probably be, if we're talking about more of that lengthened position, and I mean that where it's hardest when it's in the stretch position, are going to be RDLs, glute focused leg presses. So when you're doing a glute focused leg press versus a quad focused leg press or a regular leg press, with a glute focused leg press, you want to think about having your feet high and narrow on the machine. And that's going to allow you to get more hip flexion than knee flexion. So when you're thinking about hip flexion, you're thinking about movement in your hip as you're coming down, and that's going to stimulate your glutes more, versus if you had your feet lower on a leg press and a little bit wider, that's going to stimulate more knee flexion, which is going to be more quads. So there's ways that you can manipulate different exercises and actually just change the positioning of your feet to stimulate different areas of your body. So back to glutes. So like I said, RDLs are one of my favorite exercises for glutes and hamstrings. Glute focused leg press. I also love barbell glute bridges, 45-degree hyperextensions, which is the machine that you are laying on like this, and then you bend over like that, and then you squeeze up. So you're squeezing your glutes at the top. That's a shortened position. So I don't know if this is a good picture of that. So those would probably be my favorites. A few of the ones that I used to think were good exercises that I've now learned as I, learn more about this stuff is things like the Abduction Machine in the gym, where you're pushing your glutes out like this. That's one of the machines where you might feel a lot of sensation, especially in your glute medius, which is your side glutes, but you're actually feeling, from what I know about the research that I've seen, the muscle that's actually being stimulated within that particular movement is actually a muscle that's underneath the glutes, and I'm blanking on the name right now, and that's not actually going to be beneficial to, your glute medius, the one that you're trying to grow. So with that being said, there's a lot there, but thinking about, again, like learning about these exercises, there's a lot of complexity to it, but finding ones that you enjoy doing, but also realizing that there are some that you may see other people doing that might not be the best choice, just based off of, understanding, what's going on within these exercises. Another good exercise for like the glute medius itself would be a cable kickback, but you want to make sure that you're doing it properly. So this one's a little bit confusing because a lot of people just tend to kick back or kick out to the side. But when you're really focusing on your glute medius, you want to make sure that you're doing it in the plane of motion that the fibers of your glute medius are moving. And a lot of people think that's out to the side, which is why that Abduction Machine that I was talking about, where you're moving your legs out to the side like this, that's not actually where your fibers run, right, for your glutes. So you're going to be working the muscle that's underneath that's not going to have much in terms of like growth and like aesthetic growth, versus if you were doing an exercise and doing it in the plane that the muscle fibers are actually positioned in. So for your glute medius, that would be not out to the side, it would be more so back and out. This is very, very detailed, but the more educated you are on this, the kind of easier it is to understand, in the sense of like, okay, if the muscle fibers are running in a certain direction, then I want to work those muscle fibers in that direction. So again, with the glute medius, it's just one of those things, or with the glutes in general, just thinking about that. And I don't know, this answer is weird.
It's not weird, it's just hard, that last part was hard to imagine. Like,
yeah, so instead of like, okay.
Yes.
So when people do like kick these, instead of doing it out to the side, you do it back and out. So hip extension and abduction versus abduction.
Amazing. Thank you.
If you want to grow your glutes, you have to lift heavy weights. And so sometimes a lot of band work is not going to do that. Like that goes back to the sensation part of it. Like you might feel like you're getting a good burn in your glutes by doing like a lot of, band work with that. But typically the most growth that you're going to get is from doing exercises that have a good amount of resistance on them. So like I said, doing Romanian deadlifts, glute bridges with a barbell or even dumbbells, just thinking about exercises where you can get a good amount of load that you are taking that muscle through so that you can actually stimulate as much growth as possible versus just thinking about the sensation that you're getting. Thanks so much for watching. If you want to learn more about nutrition, fitness, or metabolic flexibility, you can check out our website, metflexlife.com. There you can find our podcast, MetFlex and Chill, our nutrition and exercise programs, our latest blog posts, free recipes, and much more.